Hello everybody, today we're going to be taking a look at my top 10 must-read books of 2021. Now these are not books that came out in any particular time. These are just 10 books that I think will make you a better person, help you get ahead in 2021. I'm a big fan that reading is important, that you can really develop yourself as a person by learning from other people, and one of the ways to do that is to read. And honestly, it actually looks good on a resume to say, hey, I've read these books. Here are 10 books I've read on business or self-improvement or whatever it may be that you're trying to get a job for. It actually really does help you. And I picked out 10 books from a wide range of different types of topics that I think will help you become a better person. And these are all books I've read myself. Now, if you like content like this, you want more, do me a big favor. Hit that thumbs up and hit that subscribe button because it really does help us. It lets us know you enjoy what we're doing here, and it lets YouTube know you enjoy what we do here. So do me a big favor, hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up. It really does help. All right, let's get started with Dream Big, Think Small. This is from Jeff Manion. It is a great series. He's a Christian author, so keep that in mind, but he has an absolutely amazing book here that no matter what you believe, I think you're going to learn something here. And it covers basically planning for an extraordinary life through big dreams that are achievable through steady progress over time. And it just doesn't talk about big ideas. It actually gives you some practical life skills that you can use to achieve big dreams through small thinking. Highly recommend it. I really do think you will be able to greatly improve yourself no matter what you believe. I think this is worth a listen, especially if you want to do something in your life, if you have some goals, but you've been struggling with how do I get from here to there to make that happen. I think this book will give you some practical tools to stick with a business plan. When I started my last company, it got really big, but not right away. It actually took several years of very small, very minimal profits to build up to what it eventually became. And topics like this would have been very helpful for me, and many of them were things that I used myself back in the day. So I highly recommend you check this out, and I will put a link to all these books down in the show notes if you want to learn more about them. Find them online where you can get them. All right, number 2, Churchill. Now this is a great book. This takes a look through all of Churchill's writings and puts them all together in a biography and a history of the man all into one place. It's a very long book. It's about 50 hours if you listen to the audiobook, but I highly recommend it. Churchill lived through some extraordinary times. He fought in the British military all over the world. He was a politician through the First World War and led Britain through the Second World War and really brought a lot of information to it. And even after the Second World War, a lot of people forget he became prime minister a second time in the 50s. Check out his book here. This was a unbelievably great read. I highly enjoyed, and apparently other people did too, as it's a New York Times bestseller, one of the Wall Street Journal's 10 best books of 2018, Economics best books of 2018, and one of the New York Times notable books of 2018. So I recommend it, as it will really give you an idea of how he dealt with certain things, his leadership approach, his style, and his overall, how he dealt with problems and overcame them. I'm a big fan of understanding history, even if you don't agree with people. I often read books of politicians I don't often agree with, but I wanted to learn about them. What made them successful? How did they handle things? How can I use that to make myself a better person? All right, number 3, the Admirals. Only 4 men in American history have ever been promoted to the rank of 5-star Admiral of the Fleet. This book takes a look at their lives, their work, and more. A lot of it's very heavy into the World War II time frame when most of them were around, but it does continue on into later times. I highly recommend you take a look at this. Again, it's one of those things that you can kind of, in this one book, take a look at 4 different people and what they did to eventually become a 5-star Admiral of the Fleet in the U.S. Navy. And it really does help you understand a little bit more of A, the world around, the big picture, B, what it took for them to get to the top of what they do. Check it out. A very fun read, surprisingly fun, light read, will keep your attention and help you learn a lot. All right, speaking of a fun read, the Console Wars. In the 90s, Sega versus Nintendo was a corporate battle that was very interesting. It was like nothing we had ever seen before. And what I thought was very interesting about this is it is very hard for a new upstart to come in and take on an established competitor and beat them. Now, for a short time, Sega was the winner of this fight. But they made some mistakes, and they eventually fell down, and now they don't even make hardware anymore. But if you are ever interested in being the underdog and fighting to become the top dog over a company in your particular field, your industry, or maybe you're just a YouTuber trying to become the next person up, taking a look at how Sega, even though they were big in Japan, was pretty much unknown here in the United States, very minor market share, grew to take on the largest video game company in the United States, and for a short time beat them. And hopefully you can learn from the mistakes they made later on and how you can avoid them if you so choose. It is very difficult. If you listen to my videos in the past where I talked about becoming a successful business person, about how if you're going to just copy another company, very rarely is that successful. This is one of the instances where for a while they were able to do it. I highly recommend you check it out. Console Wars is an excellent book. Really recommend you read it, listen to it. It's fun, it's entertaining. And if you grew up in the 90s, there's a lot of nostalgia here. But you can learn a lot from this also. Number 5. Now this one is pretty much on everybody's must-read list, and there's a reason for it. It's very good. The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. This is an excellent book. There's been quite a few revisions of this. I read the 10th anniversary version. I don't think there's many differences, but these are laws, or we can call them rules, or call them practices of leadership that will help you become an efficient leader, help you get better in your field, no matter what it may be. Even if you don't supervise people, being a leader has a lot more to do than just leading people. A lot of it has to do with how you take care of yourself. Highly recommend you take your time to read this one. This is definitely one of those books that you can put on your resume and say, hey, I read this book, and it will help you get a job. Not the only way to get a job, but it's definitely one of those little things that when people are reading resumes and they're looking for things to stand out, people who have read things like this definitely do stand out. So keep that in mind. Number 6, the generals. We talked about the admirals, but what about U.S. generals? There are a ton of generals here that from World War II to today that you can read and learn a lot about. Generals are people who put a lot of their time into their lives. A lot of these people could have made more money in the civilian world, but they dedicated their lives to the U.S. Army, and they've led us through some of the most trying times. This is a book that I highly recommend to read. Gives you also a great perspective of how times have changed from, World War II all the ways to today. Definitely worth your time. Very entertaining. All right. Now on to a few more books that will definitely be great resume builders. The 48 Laws of Power. Now, this is very interesting. This book pierces the works of over 3,000 years of history to look for 48 laws of power. Now, not only are you going to get, hey, here's what you got to do, this book takes examples from history to teach you why each of these laws are important. Very fun read. And the thing I like about it so much is that you can pick it up, read one law, and put it down. It's a very easy book to just get in and out of because each one's kind of a self-contained little area, which is a lot of fun. You can leave this by your nightstand and pick it up, learn a little bit, put it down, and move forward. Check it out, 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. I hope I said that right. My apologies if I mispronounced that. Number 8 is another one of his books, though. The 33 Strategies of War. Now you're going to say, Luke, I have no intention of being a military person. Why are you throwing military books on here? A lot of what happens in warfare is applicable to yourself. I mean, let's be honest. How many times have we been in a business war, right? You have a competitor. I get this all the time. When I was the number one site of what I did, number one YouTube channel of what I did, people would repeatedly come up. And you got a lot of lessons. Are you going to just let them steamroll you, right? Okay, they found a way to maybe do something better than you did. How are you going to respond to that? And that's a big part of war. Somebody does something and you have to respond to it. Like, okay, they came out with a little bit better product. Or maybe they came out with a unique take on something that you hadn't thought about. How are you as a company going to respond to that? That's just one example of how these 33 strategies of war could help you in your everyday life. So keep that in mind. Highly recommend it. Again, it's another book that I think will look great on a resume. All right, we've talked about Sega being the upstart taking out Nintendo and being successful and the ultimate failing. But what about Nintendo? How did Nintendo in the United States take at the time a dying industry? Video games had peaked and had the great video game crash of the 1980s. How did they rebuild that, jump in there, and get people to fall in love with video games again and dominate the market? It's a very interesting read. Highly recommend it. Jeff Ryan probably got one of the best and most entertaining histories of Nintendo here. And I really love this because it really does show you, hey, there was a reason in the United States why arcades started to fail, Atari started to fail, and more. And why was Nintendo successful in turning that around when other companies had failed? And why did they build such a huge company that to this day stands the test of time? While others have come up and become big, Nintendo is still a powerhouse within the video game industry. And how did they do that? This is a very good read. Highly recommend it. Take a look at it. And lastly, IWOZ. Steve Wozniak is often forgotten as the co-founder of Apple. We all think it's Steve Jobs, but Steve Wozniak was actually the one who invented the original Apple computer. He was the brains that put stuff together. Steve Jobs was the businessman that figured out how to sell it. And Steve Wozniak has a great book here, and it's actually a very interesting, funny, fun read with Gina Smith helping him write it, that talks about the early days of Apple, from the first true personal computer, the Apple I, to the company becoming a much larger one out there. Not only will you get a fun history of Apple, one of the most revolutionary companies of our time, you also get a good look at how they went from a small business in their garage to a massive corporation. What steps, what turns, what pitfalls did they hit along the way? This is something I struggled with greatly. When I launched my company, it grew faster. I've had companies that didn't grow. I've had companies that kind of just slowly grew. And I've had companies that grew really fast. And that can be the most dangerous and the most complicated one. How do you deal with a company that's growing faster than you can maintain it? So, suddenly you go from a company of 5 people to 500. That's a huge culture shock. I think reading Steve Wozniak's book will be great there. And it also gives you a little idea of, how do you take something that is a good idea and turn it into a business? I think we all have good ideas, but the ability to turn it into an actual business is the defining factor there. So keep that in mind. All right, quick recap. Let me rewind here. Number 1, dream big, think small. How can you take your ideas and make them happen one small step at a time? Churchill, one of the most defining leaders of the 20th century, especially the first half of the 20th century. Highly recommend you read his book. His biography is well worth your time, even though it's long. The Admirals learned the lessons from Sea Power. These are men who fought and worked their way to the very top of their industry. There's some great lessons here. Console Wars. How did Sega, the upstart, take out a massive company and go toe-to-toe with them? The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. Must read for any professional. I've had companies that make this a mandatory must-read book for all managers. The Generals. We've talked about the Navy. Now take a look at the Army. Not just in World War II, but to today. This is a must-read book. about some very interesting people and how they became successful and how they got ahead and what was their leadership style. The 48 Laws of Power. This is a fun book that you can easily pick up, put down. Highly recommend it. And from the same author, 33 Strategies of War. Again, there's a lot here to keep in mind. Super Mario. Let's look at Nintendo, one of the most innovative companies of the last 30 years. How have they stood the test of time and not just be a company that was a flash in the pan with a couple of successful products, but stay successful right to today. And lastly, IWOZ, probably one of my favorite books here if you're looking for a fun, interesting read. He was the guy that invented it, the Apple computer, and was there as Steve Jobs took that idea and created the company we all know today as Apple. And he gives you kind of a back row seat in the car as they drive down that path to build Apple from their garage to the multi-billion-dollar company it is today. So check out these books, link in the show notes. If you're new here, do me a big favor. Hit the subscribe button, hit the thumbs up. It really does help us because it lets YouTube know you enjoy what we do here. And hopefully we can help you learn something new. Thanks for your support. Thanks for watching this video. I really appreciate it.